Yes, and now it's time for our first speakers. It's my pleasure to introduce you to Mr. Noel, who retired after 27 years active duty service in the U.S. Marine Corps. He has served in command and staff billets from platoon through division and United States Central Command. He currently serves as the wargame manager with the Marine Corps Warfighting Lab. He directs planning, coordination, and execution of the Warfighting Lab's wargaming efforts and scoping of future wargames. He also serves as the division's representative to other agencies and service wargaming organizations on operational planning, support requirements, and capabilities for wargaming. On his side today, there is Julia, Miss Miller. She has experience in managing small and large-scale multi-service wargames and collaborating with senior military and defense industry executives. As the game director with the Marine Corps Warfighting Lab, Julia acts as the primary interface with game sponsor to discern and articulate wargame objectives and manages game production from start to finish. And she also holds a bachelor degree in political science from Davidson College. Thank you, Julia and Tom, to be here with us today. The floor is yours for the next 20 minutes.
All right. Thank you very much, Eleanor, for that introduction. And ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon. Again, Tom Noel, the wargame manager for the Marine Corps Warfighting Lab. And do we have the slides up? I'm not sure where that one goes. Oh, thank you. And next slide, please. I'll just give you a little bit of background on who we are. The Marine Corps Warfighting Lab falls underneath the Deputy Commandant for Combat Development and Integration. That's one of the Deputy Commandants for the Headquarters Marine Corps. Underneath the CD&I is the Marine Corps Warfighting Lab with a one-star general as the commander. And you can see the 5 different divisions within the lab itself with our headquarters, our science and technology, experimental division, recently futures division, and the wargaming division as well. All interacting and working towards a single goal, with the end state being to develop a threat-informed and future-focused analytical supported force design and development endorsements relevant to stand-in force concept. Yeah. Next slide, please. All right. For us, why do we wargame? A couple different parts. The priority for the wargaming division is to test and develop doctrine and concepts for the Marine Corps. We are not the only organization within the Marine Corps that conducts war games, but our focus is solely on the future concepts and future doctrine, looking 5, 10, 20 years ahead, trying to be the headlights for the Marine Corps and where we're going to be going. Out of that, some of the results and impacts of our analytical war games impact the budgeting process as well as future force structure. Some of the results that we'll take out from our war games, we apply to concepts, and within those concepts, some of the key material solutions to enable those concepts, whether it be ships, missiles, other systems. The war games that we run and the results that we come out of those war games provide the data to further inform some of the decision makers in those budgetary processes. Then we also use it to educate future military and defense leaders with the educational side. Not really a big focus for the warfighting lab itself, but part of the Marine Corps warfighting efforts. For the Marine Corps, we look at it as 2 different ways. We've got our analytical war games and our educational. The big difference being educational focuses on the players. It's try to educate the students going through courses in the decision-making process. They're the main effort. The ones that the Marine Corps Warfighting Lab focuses on are analytical. These are decisions made in a realistic environment. We are looking for the insights that come out of the war game. While the educational side focuses on the players themselves or the students going through courses, we're looking for the insights that are coming out of the players, those players being subject matter experts in whatever field that they're coming to represent. And we'll use this to investigate concepts, develop information and insights to explore for further development. And really, as we work through our wargame process, and Julie will hit on some of this, it's not so much success or failure, it's the information, the data that is captured as we go through the war game. It doesn't matter if the war game is a win or a loss. What we're looking for is the data that went into the decisions for those players that are coming to either develop further doctrine or explore concepts that the Marine Corps is looking at 20 years into the future. I'm going much faster. And next slide, please. Actually, you can jump one more. Thank you. All right, on the analytical side, we begin and develop all of our war games from our problem statement, the purpose, and then the objectives. And that works through into our research questions to the actual execution of the war game. And everything is built around the objectives and the research questions that we need to answer. As we start off, we will sit down, both the game director, myself, the sponsor, or the concept writers, and work through the process. One war game may not be enough to address a future operating concept. It may take a series or a family of war games to fully explore a concept and bring it to further experimentation with either live virtual forces, or we may get some results coming out of the initial war games that require further investigation that may prove a concept unviable or just not mature enough at that time. As we work into our research questions, that becomes the foundation of the war game. Those are the key aspects that we are trying to answer from the war game itself. Yeah, and as we go through, the research questions built by our game developers, they become the main effort and the focus before we even come into the design of the war game itself. Everything revolves around answering those research questions. If the design of the war game isn't properly built and we can't get the specific answers that we're looking for, the war game may run successfully, but the results may not provide the information we need. And as we go through the game execution, you can see the blue arrow going from the right to left. As we start the war game itself, we start to work back through answering those research questions, the player decisions, and some questions and answer sessions with the players themselves on why they're making the decisions, to get back all the way to the beginning again as we complete that circle on answering the objectives, answering the research questions for the war game. All right, and next slide, please. And at this point, I'll stop and hand it over to Julia.
Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you again for having me here. So I'm going to talk us through a little bit about how we actually complete our war games here at Wargaming Division. So starting off with our team structure. At the top, we have a game director, which is the position that I hold. This is a government position, and we currently have 3 game directors on staff here with fully equipped teams. Those teams are made up of an assistant game director, a data capture and analysis analyst, our game designer, our game developer, someone from security division, our IT support, and our graphic designers. We are also then supported by an internal Intel/Red team group. So we have subject matter experts ranging from geospatial information to someone who can actually play as the Red team in our games. So we heavily rely on them to give us accurate information and make sure that our players are fighting a difficult and accurate Red team. We are also supported by our operations and logistics section here at Wargaming Division. And finally, we are working to integrate with modeling and simulation to continue the growth of wargaming here at Marine Corps Warfighting Lab. The game director is looking outside. So we are also the first ones to coordinate with our sponsor and make sure that we are getting accurate research questions and making sure that our game design is hitting those research questions, as Tom said previously. Next slide, please. So here's our 7-phase life cycle. So this was a life cycle that was created by primarily the game directors. All of us had had at least a year or two of experience running war games here for the Marine Corps. And so we wanted to refine how we went about doing that. Starting with our phase 1, this is where we'll have our first planning conferences, such as our kickoff meeting, so meeting with the sponsor for the first time, our concept development conference, our initial planning conference, main planning conference, final planning conference, finally execution, and post-game analysis. So as we go through this timeline, primarily it's about 6 to 9 months for a larger war game, which can range anywhere from 80 to 200 individuals. Or we can also scale it back and make it a little bit shorter if we want to conduct tabletop exercises and have anywhere from 10 to 50 individuals. So this process is very much a living process, and we are still working to refine it as we go on. We have executed about 2 games with this process, about to execute our 3rd, and we will continue to refine it after we start doing more tabletop exercises. Next slide, please. This slide goes a little bit more in depth into what those phases actually do. So I've highlighted our planning conferences. Those are our key milestones. And so as a game director, this is what I absolutely have to keep in mind to make sure that we are hitting our goals throughout the process, while still making sure that we have great game development. Our design is meeting up with our objectives, with our research questions. And that's an integral relationship that our game developer and game designer have to have with our data capture analyst. So going through define, that's where we receive our game topic, make sure that the sponsor understands his or her role within the game, and start that preliminary research, making sure that we fully understand the concept. This is led by our data capture analyst, but we have to make sure that each and every member of the team understands what we're trying to get after. We then define the problem and purpose. These are our first initial steps into game design. And then we continue to find our objectives after that, as well as our timeline, making sure that we're setting up those key milestones. We then sign in an initiating directive. This is a sort of contract between us and whoever the sponsor is, making sure that we are both in agreement what the end state will be. And finally, developing a POAM. That is an internal tool that we use to make sure that we understand all of the individual actions that we need to take as a team to get to the final end state. Moving on to scope, we usually send out an announcement message to the Marine Corps, as well as the Navy, Air Force, etc., whoever we will need for the game, to make sure that they understand the game is coming, because it is a huge lift, especially when we have 200 individuals coming here to Quantico. Next, we determine the war game type. You'll notice that we hold off determining what kind of game we're going to run until after our problem, purpose, and objectives are set and our research questions are in development. This is because we don't want to put the cart before the horse. We don't want our research questions to fit the game. We want the game to fit the research questions. We'll also identify limiting factors and assumptions. This is absolutely critical to make sure that we have our left and right limits, making sure that we don't have scope creep. We'll then determine our initial scenario, and this is something that we work with the sponsor very in depth with, to make sure that we are on target, making sure that the scale of the game, time scale, horizon, and the battle space domains are all accurate. I'll skip the next few, moving over to design with our initial planning conference. This is where we actually start to invite outside individuals into our planning conferences. So that way, everything from the problem, purpose, and objectives are internal. There's no outside factors, and then we allow individuals to take shots at it, make sure that it is on target, and we continue with our game design. We determine assessment criteria for our research questions using that analytical rigor that not only the Marine Corps has, but also all the external individuals that we invite have as well. We'll identify appropriate adjudication techniques, and this is where we'll actually start to have tests for our games, and we will invite external players to come in because we're not always the subject matter experts. So it's absolutely critical to have people outside of Wargaming Division take a look, especially if it's anything from logistics, to make sure that we are fully understanding, since those are important topics to address here at the Marine Corps Warfighting Lab. We'll continue to refine our design and our scenario if needed. Now's the time that if we are looking at the game and it's not meeting our objectives, we will scrap it. It is better to have an accurate design than to continue with one. As many of our wargamers know, it's better to have a better design than to continue with one that you have. Next, we'll determine wargame format. So visualization, player freedom, time progression, etc. These are all continuing as we go through this process. We'll go over to develop. So our main planning conference. This is where we really are taking a hard look at, are we meeting our milestones? Are we going to hit that end state? This is our major data call as well, to make sure that our game is fully informed with all of the information that we need, and to start asking for players as well, because it can be a huge lift when we have some of our larger games. We'll continue to refine the scenario, develop an adjudication plan, and to verify MMTs performed to requirements and to finalize those. We'll end this phase with our confirmation brief to our commanding general. It's a go or no-go. Either our plan needs refinement or we continue full steam ahead into the rehearsal phase. Throughout this entire time, we've had ongoing playtests, and we'll end with a final planning conference. This is where we will meet with our external stakeholders, our absolute final data call. If there's any capabilities, other concepts that might help with our war games, this is where we need to know. It's also our final staff call, where we ask for as many individuals as we can come to our games and to conduct our administrative support meeting and to have our staff X. This is internal, to make sure that all of our recorders, our facilitators, and our external staff understand what needs to go into this game and make sure that we are prepared. We move on to execution. We almost always start our war games with leveling briefs. This is because we have individuals from all over the Marine Corps come to play our games. So we want to make sure that everyone starts off on the same slate. So we also set expectations here and present our problem, purpose, and objectives. We then train our players, making sure that they understand the tools that they will be using, context, and the concept. And finally, we get to the fun part, we conduct our game. This is always the best part as a game director, to see the team absolutely flourish after 6 to 9 months of hard work. We start to address those research questions, as Tom mentioned earlier. After the game, everyone gets to go home except for our data capture analyst. He or she then has about 10 days to write a quick look report. So this is very low analytics, just highlighting the key information that we saw during the war game. This report even starts during the game itself, just to get ahead of it. From there, we conduct an after-action review to make sure that we address anything that might have gone wrong with the game, and also address things that went well. We also look at our life cycle, making sure that it still addresses all the milestones that we need to hit, and if not, how do we go about doing it better? And finally, our analysts will write our final report that is due 90 days out from execution, and everything is published onto our website. All right, next slide, please. So here we're going to look at how we're implementing modeling and simulation. So this is something that we are continuing to work on. As you notice, you'll see events from our main life cycle. Our modeling and simulations director is trying to better integrate into wargaming, because they can directly feed off of each other. So this is something that we're looking forward to in the future. We are starting to have both pre and post game analysis done by our modeling and simulation experts, but this is something that we're hoping that we can actually run simultaneously during our games. Next slide, please. So this is all that we had prepared for you this morning or this afternoon, but we're happy to answer any questions during the Q&A session. Again, thank you for having us.